The wind howled through the dense forest, a mournful symphony that seemed to underscore the unease that had settled deep within me. With every turn of the road, I felt the weight of the night pressing down, suffocating and relentless. The moon played a treacherous game of hide-and-seek with the clouds, casting fleeting glimmers of light that revealed just enough to spark the imagination. I reached for the radio dial, hoping to break the silence that had become deafening. The crooning voice of a pop sensation filled the car, a desperate attempt to ward off the encroaching darkness. But even the catchy tune couldn't ease the tightening knot in my stomach. It was then that I saw her. A figure emerged from the shadows on the side of the road, a lone hitchhiker under the flickering glow of a distant streetlight. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as my foot instinctively eased off the gas. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to keep driving, to ignore the hitchhiker and continue on my way. But curiosity, or perhaps a darker impulse, won out. I pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath my tires as the engine's growl faded into silence. The hitchhiker's form was obscured by the dim light, her features hidden in a cloak of shadows. A chill ran down my spine as I watched her approach, her footsteps deliberate, as if each movement was choreographed with precision. She slid into the passenger seat with an elegance that bordered on unnatural. The smell of decay and something otherworldly filled the air, a scent that seemed to seep into my very bones. I forced a smile, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "Where are you headed?" "Only a few miles up the road," she purred, her voice dripping with a syrupy sweetness that sent shivers down my spine. Her eyes, crimson like freshly spilled blood, locked onto mine with an intensity that bordered on invasive. It was as if she could see through me, peering into my darkest fears and secrets. As we began to drive, an uncomfortable silence settled in the car. The tension was palpable, like a taut wire ready to snap. Her gaze never left me, and I found myself compelled to fill the silence with my own words, as if to distract myself from the growing unease. "I've always had this irrational fear of clowns," I blurted out, instantly regretting the admission. It felt absurd to confess such a thing to a stranger, especially one as unsettling as her. She laughed, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. "Clowns, you say? How delightfully quaint." And then it happened. Her form began to shift and twist, a nightmarish dance of limbs and contorted flesh. In a matter of seconds, the hitchhiker had transformed into a towering clown, complete with grotesquely elongated limbs, jagged teeth, and eyes that glowed with malevolence. My heart raced, its thunderous rhythm a stark contrast to the eerie calm that had taken over the car. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled with the door handle, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding beside me. But the door seemed to resist my frantic attempts, as if held shut by an invisible force. The clown's voice echoed around the car, distorted and haunting, like a nightmare made manifest. "Afraid of clowns, you say? Well then, my dear, I hope you enjoy the show." Its limbs stretched and twisted, morphing into nightmarish tendrils that snaked towards me with a sickening squelch. Finally, I managed to wrench the door open, adrenaline surging through my veins. I stumbled out of the car and into the darkness, my phone's feeble flashlight casting feeble rays of light on the forest floor. The clown's laughter echoed in the distance, a haunting reminder of the terror I had just witnessed. As I ran, my thoughts raced as wildly as my pounding heart. I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all, how in a world saturated with horror movies and creepypastas, I had become the protagonist of my own terrifying tale. Reality had warped, and there was no escape from the monstrosity that had crossed my path. I stumbled upon a moonlit clearing, my breath ragged and my body trembling. I dared to steal a glance behind me, and there she was again, standing at the edge of the clearing, her form shifting and distorting like a digital glitch. With a voice that seemed to penetrate my very mind, she spoke, "Ready for an encore?" Dread settled over me like a suffocating blanket, the realization that there was no escaping this nightmare. In a world where reality itself could twist and bend to the will of malevolent entities, was nowhere to hide. I braced myself for the horrors that awaited, for the twisted performance that this shape-shifting abomination had in store. And so, in the heart of the night, under the baleful gaze of the moon, I faced my fear and confronted the unthinkable. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness, and there was no turning back. Summoning every ounce of courage within me, I turned to face the abomination that had haunted my nightmares. The clown's form continued to shift and contort, a grotesque display that defied the laws of nature. Its eyes, burning with an otherworldly fire, bore into me, stripping away any semblance of control I had left. "Bravo," it hissed, its voice like 1,000 whispers echoing in the wind. "You faced your fear, and now you shall reap what you've sown." With a chilling laugh, the clown extended its elongated limbs, each one ending in a jagged appendage that resembled a nightmarish blade. The moon's wan light danced off its sinister form as it advanced, each step calculated and deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat of terror as I stumbled backward. But there was nowhere to run, no escape from the malevolent force that had ensnared me. The world around me seemed to warp and twist, as if reality itself had become the canvas upon which the clown painted its horrors. The trees seemed to leer at me with sinister faces, their branches contorted into gnarled hands that reached for me. As the clown drew closer, I felt a numbing cold seep into my bones, its touch a sickening caress against my skin. It raised one of its elongated arms, the appendage morphing into a serrated blade that glinted with malevolent intent. My voice caught in my throat, my body frozen with a fear that transcended reason. The blade descended with a swift, horrifying arc, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable impact. But instead of the searing pain I anticipated, I felt a strange sensation, a tearing of reality itself. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in a nightmarish circus tent, the air heavy with the scent of decay and twisted laughter. The circus tent stretched on endlessly, a labyrinth of horrors that defied logic. Monstrous creatures roamed the dimly lit passages, their grotesque forms a cruel parody of nature. The air seemed to vibrate with an unholy energy, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. The clown stood before me, its form shifting between monstrous shapes with each blink of an eye. Its voice echoed through the tent, resonating in my mind like a cacophony of screams. "Welcome to my domain, a realm born from your deepest fears and anxieties. You see, fear is a canvas, and I am the artist." It raised its arms, and the very walls of the tent seemed to close in on me, shifting and morphing into twisted faces that contorted in agony. The ground beneath me quivered, and I realized with a growing horror that the tent itself was alive, a sentient entity that reveled in my terror. The clown's laughter reverberated through the air as it circled me, its form a kaleidoscope of horror. "I shall show you the depths of your fear, the tendrils that have wrapped themselves around your soul. You will confront every nightmare, every regret, till you are broken." And so it began, the torment, the relentless parade of horrors that tore at the edges of my sanity. I faced my fears, each one magnified and distorted by the clown's malevolent power. Claustrophobic tunnels stretched on forever, my voice reduced to a pitiful whimper as I was pursued by shadowy figures. Heights became chasms of despair, and every failure of my past was laid bare before me. Time lost all meaning as I was subjected to the twisted whims of the clown. Days blended into nights, nightmares into waking hours. The boundaries of my mind dissolved as I struggled to distinguish between reality and illusion. The clown reveled in my suffering, its laughter a constant reminder of the abyss that had consumed me. But even in the darkest depths of despair, an ember of defiance burned within me. With each torment I endured, I found a shard of strength, a glimmer of resilience that refused to be snuffed out. I realized that the clown's power was rooted in my fear, and as I faced my demons head-on, that power began to wane. As I confronted my regrets and traumas, the tent around me began to tremble, its walls distorting and warping. The clown's laughter grew frantic, its once confident demeanor now tinged with desperation. With a final surge of determination, I shouted into the void, "I will not be defined by my fear." The world around me shattered, reality itself fracturing and splintering like glass. I found myself standing once more on the desolate road, the moon shining high above. The circus tent, the horrors, the clown, all had vanished, leaving nothing but the echoes of my own resolve. I drove on through the night, the weight of my ordeal heavy on my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer paralyzed by fear. I had stared into the abyss, faced the darkest corners of my mind, and emerged with a newfound strength. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The world was still fraught with unknown terrors, but I was no longer a passive victim. I had confronted my fear, survived the torment, and emerged as something more. And so, I drove on, the road stretching out before me like an endless journey. The night had tested my limits, pushed me to the brink, and in the process, I had discovered an unyielding resilience that would carry me through whatever horrors the world had to offer.
The city that never sleeps had always been my playground, a place of endless possibilities and excitement. But on that fateful night, the vibrant streets of New York transformed into a realm of terror and darkness that I could never have imagined. It all began innocently enough. My friends and I decided to embark on a unique adventure, a late-night ride on the infamous 2 train. We were no strangers to the subway, having navigated the labyrinthine tunnels countless times. But this time was different. As the train rumbled through the underground passages, the lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. As we made our way through the dimly lit subway car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. My friends chatted and laughed, completely unaware of the undercurrent of unease that gripped me. I stole glances at the other passengers, each one seemingly lost in their own world. But there was something off about them, a coldness in their eyes, a stillness in their movements that sent shivers down my spine. Our pit stop was the local deli, a haven for late-night cravings and slices of greasy pizza. But as we stepped out onto the platform, the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The deli's neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow on the sidewalk. And that's when I saw them, figures lurking in the shadows, their features obscured by darkness. As we made our way back to the train, I noticed a man leaning against the wall, his eyes fixated on us with an intensity that made my heart race. His lips curled into a sinister smile, and I couldn't help but quicken my pace. My friends remained oblivious, lost in their conversations as the man's laughter echoed in my ears. The train's doors slid shut, sealing us inside with an unsettling sense of finality. The lights flickered once again, plunging the car into darkness before returning with an unnatural brightness. And that's when I saw her, a woman in a tattered dress, her skin as pale as the moon, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. She moved with a grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying, her fingers trailing along the windows as if longing to break through the glass. "Hey, did you see that?" I whispered to my friend, trying to keep my voice steady. But he merely shrugged, engrossed in his phone. It was as if I was the only one who could see the ghastly figures that lurked in the shadows of the train. As we approached the next station, the train screeched to a halt, the brakes squealing in protest. The lights flickered once again, and in the brief moments of darkness, I caught glimpses of them. Vampires with fangs that glinted in the light, witches with eyes that burned with an otherworldly fire, and shadowy figures that seemed to shift and twist with every blink of the eye. My heart pounded in my chest as the train remained immobile, the air growing thick with an oppressive silence. Panic rose within me, threatening to consume my sanity, and then a voice, a whisper that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. "Welcome to our world," it hissed, its words echoing in the recesses of my mind. I clutched my head, trying to drown out the voice, but it persisted, growing louder and more insistent with every passing second. And then, as abruptly as it had stopped, the train jolted back to life, hurtling forward with a force that sent us stumbling. The lights flickered one final time, and when they came back on, the other passengers were gone. The vampires, witches, and shadowy figures had vanished into thin air, leaving behind an empty subway car and an overwhelming sense of dread. As the train pulled into the next station, my friends and I stumbled out onto the platform, our breaths ragged and our minds reeling. The deli's neon sign flickered once again, casting an eerie glow that seemed to mock us. And as we made our way out of the station and into the city streets, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see those ghastly figures lurking in the shadows. The city that I had once known and loved had become a nightmare, a twisted realm of terror and darkness that defied explanation. As I walked past parks and chopped cheese sandwich vendors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the creatures from the train were still out there, waiting in the shadows. And so, as the sun began to rise and the city slowly came to life once again, I knew that I would never look at New York the same way. The bustling streets and familiar landmarks were forever tainted by the horrors I had witnessed on that train. The city's secrets had been laid bare, and I was left to grapple with the knowledge that there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, waiting to consume anyone who dared to venture too deep into its depths.
The next day dawned with a sense of foreboding that hung over the city like a shroud. The events of the previous night had left a haunting imprint on our minds, and a heavy unease settled in our hearts. As the sun's rays filtered through the towering skyscrapers, we gathered to discuss the inexplicable horrors we had faced on that fateful subway ride. Over coffee and bagels, we recounted the spine-chilling encounters with vampires, witches, and shadowy figures that had vanished into thin air. But little did we know that the nightmare was far from over. A solemn realization dawned upon us. One of our own, one of our closest friends, had been infected by whatever malevolent force had permeated the subway. As the day wore on, signs of our friend's transformation began to manifest. His once vibrant eyes had darkened, his skin took on an otherworldly pallor, and an aura of darkness seemed to emanate from him. But what truly chilled our bones were the unnatural abilities he was developing, powers that defied the laws of nature and reason. The city's shadows seemed to gather around him, responding to his newfound abilities. The same shadows that had danced ominously on the subway train were now under his command. It was a terrifying spectacle, watching as he bent the darkness to his will, creating tendrils of inky blackness that snaked through the air like living things. Yet, despite the horror of the situation, a thread of camaraderie and dark humor wove its way into our conversations. "Well, Bob," I quipped, "you always said you wanted to stand out in a crowd." Laughter mingled with tension as we tried to cope with the unimaginable reality unfolding before us. But our laughter was short-lived, for as night fell, the shadows returned with a vengeance. They materialized as nightmarish entities, twisted and malevolent, seeking to envelop us in their suffocating embrace. With a newfound sense of unity born from terror, we stood our ground, determined to face the horrors head-on. What followed was a battle unlike anything we had ever experienced. Our friend, now both victim and perpetrator, unleashed his dark abilities against the shadowy onslaught. Bolts of darkness clashed with the ethereal figures, creating explosions of light and darkness that illuminated the night with an otherworldly glow. Sarcasm and wit mingled with the sounds of battle, a desperate attempt to retain a semblance of sanity amidst the chaos. But the battle's conclusion was far from triumphant. Our friend's abilities, though powerful, came at a terrifying cost. As he fought to protect us, the darkness within him seemed to consume him from within. The once familiar face twisted into an expression of agony as the darkness overtook him, his very essence becoming intertwined with the malevolent force that had plagued us. When the dust settled, the shadows dispersed, leaving us to grapple with the devastating aftermath. Our friend was gone, lost to the very darkness he had battled. The city's streets, now devoid of both the supernatural terrors and the friend who had become one of them, felt emptier than ever before. In the end, the horrors we faced had not only revealed the darkness lurking beneath the city's surface, but it also forged an unbreakable bond between us. The laughter, the camaraderie, and the shared fear had bound us together in ways we could have never anticipated. As the city resumed its bustling activity, we walked away forever changed, forever haunted by the knowledge that there are depths of terror lurking in even the most familiar of places. Sometimes I still see glimpses of him in the shadows, but that could be because I truly do miss my good friend.
As I embarked on a cross-country road trip, little did I know that the vast expanse of highway stretching ahead would become the setting for a terrifying and inexplicable series of events that would haunt me for the rest of my days. It all began innocently enough with me, a rather average individual with a penchant for the absurd and a love for adventure, setting out on a journey that would soon have me questioning the very fabric of reality itself. It was a crisp morning, the kind that makes you appreciate the simple pleasure of sipping hot coffee and singing along to your favorite tunes as the miles melted away beneath your tires. My trusty old car, a relic from the days when cassette tapes were still a thing, was loaded up with snacks, a hastily assembled playlist, and my undeniable enthusiasm for the open road. I had heard tales of haunted highways and eerie encounters, but I brushed them off as mere urban legends, the products of overactive imaginations and late-night campfire stories. I cruised through picturesque landscapes, capturing the scenic beauty in snapshots and making mental notes to update my social media with envy-inducing posts. It was during one of these stops at a seemingly deserted roadside diner straight out of a vintage movie that my journey took a bizarre turn. The diner was a quaint little place, its neon sign flickering with a faint buzz. The bell above the door tinkled cheerfully as I walked in, but the interior was anything but inviting. The air was thick with an almost palpable tension, and the few patrons seated at the booths seemed frozen in their conversations. Their eyes locked onto something that I couldn't quite see. A shiver crawled down my spine, and I instinctively felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. A husky voice from behind the counter interrupted my unease, and I jumped, turning to face a waitress who seemed as if she'd stepped out of a time capsule. Her name tag read Mabel, and she gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sit anywhere you like, hun," she drawled, her expression eerily neutral. "What'll it be?" With an awkward chuckle, I slid into a booth and scanned the menu, the hair on my arm standing on end. My usual confidence was slipping, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread that I couldn't shake off. The waitress returned, her smile now an unsettling leer, and took my order without writing a single word. As I watched her disappear into the dimly lit kitchen, a disconcerting realization hit me. There was something deeply wrong with this place. I fumbled for my phone, intending to call a friend or family member to share my odd experience, but to my horror, there was no signal. Not a single bar. Panic welled up within me as I glanced around the diner, realizing that every single patron had ceased their conversations and was now staring directly at me. Their eyes, devoid of emotion, seemed to bore into my very soul, and a suffocating feeling of being watched enveloped me. My heart pounding, I decided it was time to leave. I hastily threw a few bills on the table and made my way to the exit, my footsteps echoing through the hushed diner. Just as I reached for the doorknob, the bell above the door emitted a bone-chilling creak, and a low, guttural growl reverberated through the air. The patrons' heads turned in unison, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the daylight, my heart racing like a runaway train. As the diner's unsettling aura faded into the distance, I vowed never to speak of that place again. But the strangeness didn't end there. Over the next few days, I found myself encountering bizarre phenomena, shadowy figures darting across the road, glimpses of unfamiliar landscapes that seemed to defy the laws of geography, and a persistent feeling of being pursued by something unseen and malevolent. I pushed my car to its limits, driving through the night, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. It was during one particularly harrowing stretch of road that I noticed a mysterious figure hitchhiking at the side of the highway. My instincts screamed at me to keep driving, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I slowed down to offer a ride. The hitchhiker, clad in tattered clothes and with wild eyes, climbed into the passenger seat without a word. I tried to make small talk, my voice quivering with anxiety, but the hitchhiker remained eerily silent. As I stole glances at them, I noticed something odd. Their reflection was distorted in the rearview mirror, their features constantly shifting and changing. My heart raced as I struggled to maintain control of the car, the road ahead stretching into an endless abyss. I couldn't shake the feeling that the hitchhiker was somehow connected to the sinister events that had been plaguing me. I mustered the courage to ask them their name, but their response sent a shock, wave of terror through me. "I am the unseen road, the path that leads to your deepest fears," they intoned, their voice echoing in my mind. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt on the deserted road. The hitchhiker turned to me, their eyes now pitch black, and a malevolent smile spread across their face. As they reached out towards me, I felt a force pulling me towards them. my thoughts fragmenting and reality warping around me. In a final surge of adrenaline, I wrenched the car door open and stumbled out onto the road. The hitchhiker's laughter echoed in my ears as I ran, my heart pounding like a drum. The world around me twisted and contorted, the very fabric of reality unraveling before my eyes. And then, with a deafening crash, everything went black. I awoke to the sound of sirens surrounded by flashing lights and concerned faces. I was told that I had been found unconscious by the side of the road, my car a mangled wreck. I tried to explain the horrors I had experienced, the unseen road and the malevolent hitchhiker, but the paramedics exchanged worried glances, clearly convinced that my ordeal had taken a toll on my sanity. As I was transported to the hospital, I couldn't help but wonder if what I had experienced was a product of my own mind, a nightmarish hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But deep down, a nagging doubt remained, a doubt that whispered of an unseen road, a road that leads to the darkest corners of human imagination and the unknown. To this day, I can't drive down a deserted highway without feeling a shiver run down my spine, without wondering if the unseen road is watching, waiting for its next unwitting traveler. And as the miles stretch out ahead, I can't help but recall the haunting words of the hitchhiker. I am the unseen road, the path that leads to your deepest fears.
There are certain moments in life when you can't help but wonder if the universe has a particularly devious sense of humor. That's exactly what I found myself contemplating one fateful night, as I sat in the driver's seat of my now dead car, staring at the phone in my hand that promised salvation in the form of AAA, or OnStar, or any other celestial being that could whisk me away from the deserted stretch of road that had become my not-so-charming refuge. Let me set the scene for you. It was one of those nights when the stars seemed to twinkle with a mischievous gleam, as if they were in on the cosmic joke that was about to unfold. My car had decided that this was the perfect moment to throw a tantrum, sputtering and wheezing like an asthmatic walrus before finally giving up the ghost. And there I was, the unwitting protagonist of my very own late-night horror comedy, stuck in the middle of nowhere with nothing but my sense of impending doom and a half-eaten bag of stale chips for company. So, with a resigned sigh and the flair of a true modern hero, I dialed AAA. The hold music started playing, a cheery tune that felt like a cruel reminder of the life I once had, and I settled in for what would surely be a long and soul-crushing wait. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just the usual paranoia that comes with being stranded in the dark. It was a distinct sensation, like an invisible audience had gathered to witness my automotive misfortune. And then, just as I was starting to contemplate the existential implications of my situation, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned to look out the window, and there it was, a figure, shrouded in shadow, standing at the edge of the road. My heart decided that this was the perfect time to set a new land speed record as it raced in my chest. Great, I muttered to myself. Just what I needed. A late-night visitor from the netherworld. As if on cue, my phone crackled to life, and a voice that oozed faux empathy informed me that they were experiencing higher than usual call volumes, and that my estimated wait time was approximately forever and a day. Fantastic. With no other option but to wait and hope that my eventual rescuers wouldn't be the spectral kind, I begrudgingly locked the car doors and rolled up the windows. I kept my gaze fixed on the figure, who remained ominously still, like a statue with a particularly creepy taste in fashion. My imagination, fueled by hours of binge-watching horror movies, conjured up all sorts of scenarios. A vengeful spirit, a deranged hitchhiker, a lost time traveler who just really needed directions to the nearest wormhole. After what felt like an eternity, a car's headlights pierced the darkness, and I heaved a sigh of relief that was equal parts gratitude and sheer desperation. AAA had finally arrived like a knight in shining armor, if knights were equipped with tow trucks and a distinctly disinterested expression. The mechanic, a deadpan individual who seemed to have perfected the art of monotone speech, went about his business as if rescuing damsels, or dudes, in distress was all in a day's work. As the car was being winched onto the tow truck, I couldn't resist glancing back at the figure that had haunted my imagination just moments ago. To my surprise, the mysterious stranger was now standing by the tow truck, conversing with the mechanic in animated gestures. My anxiety was temporarily replaced by confusion, and the witty commentary that had been bubbling up within me finally burst forth. "Ah, the classic stranger by the tow truck scenario," I quipped to no one in particular. "I hear it's the latest trend in hitchhiker fashion." The mechanic shot me a bewildered look, clearly wondering if he had stumbled upon a deranged comedian in addition to a stranded motorist. I chuckled to myself, relishing in the absurdity of it all. And then, just as I was about to offer the mechanic a dramatically staged bow for his towing expertise, the figure turned to me and raised a hand in a casual wave. "Thanks for the entertainment," they called out, their voice carrying on the night breeze. I blinked, momentarily speechless, as the mechanic wrapped up his work and prepared to leave. I managed a weak wave in return, my nerves still jittery from the unexpected encounter. And as the tow truck rumbled away into the night, I found myself reflecting on the oddity of the situation. Life has a funny way of serving up moments that are equal parts terrifying and hilarious, like a cosmic game of truth or dare. Late-night encounters with spectral hitchhikers might not have been on my itinerary, but they sure made for a story to tell. And as I finally settled into the passenger seat of the tow truck, I couldn't help but chuckle at the sheer quirkiness of it all. The entity's chilling words hung in the air like a curse. "Guess you're not the only one who needs a ride tonight." The sinister undertone in its voice sent shivers down my spine, freezing me in a moment of terror. The car's interior grew colder despite the stifling summer night outside, as an unsettling presence settled in. My knuckles turned white as they clenched the steering wheel. "Oh, wonderful," I managed to mutter, a thin veil of sarcasm barely concealing the unease that gnawed at my insides. Just what I needed, an otherworldly hitchhiker on my deserted late-night drive. The entity reclined in the passenger seat, an enigmatic figure cloaked in shadow. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, devoid of humanity. "Human vulnerability is truly remarkable," it mused, a smile tugging at its lips. "You journey through life, ignorant of the forces that lurk just beyond your perception." The car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a desolate road that seemed to stretch endlessly into oblivion. My heart raced as I navigated the twists and turns, all the while aware of the malevolent presence beside me. "So what's your story?" I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying my attempt at casual conversation. The entity's laughter was a haunting melody that echoed in the enclosed space. "Stories are not always meant to be shared, mortal," it replied, a hint of something far more sinister than amusement in its tone. "But since you ask, I am but a traveler between realms, a specter drawn to the lost and the forsaken." I stole a glance at the entity, my gaze meeting its unnerving eyes. "Well, congratulations," I quipped, the sarcasm returning to my voice with a vengeance. "You found the perfect company in a lost traveler on a deserted road. Must be your lucky night." The entity's smile widened, revealing teeth that glistened in the dim light. "Luck has nothing to do with it," it hissed, the air around us growing colder still. "Fate has a way of leading souls to where they truly belong." The road ahead seemed to warp and twist, its familiar features contorting into a nightmarish landscape. The moon hung in the sky like a baleful eye, casting eerie shadows that danced with malevolence. "And where exactly do I belong?" I asked, a chill running down my spine as a sense of impending doom settled over me. The entity's eyes never left me, its gaze a piercing force that seemed to strip away my defenses. "You belong to the realm of the forgotten," it whispered, its voice a sinister caress. "A realm where darkness reigns and lost souls find no solace." My grip on the steering wheel tightened as the car hurtled forward, its engine's roar a stark contrast to the suffocating silence that enveloped us. "So, what's the grand plan here?" I questioned, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. "You give me a glimpse of the abyss and then what? Leave me to pick up the pieces?" The entity's laughter echoed through the void, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. "Oh, you misunderstand," it purred, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "This is not a mere glimpse. This is a journey of initiation, a passage into the realm of nightmares that you can never escape." As the car sped on, the boundaries between reality and nightmare grew thin, the two merging into a nightmarish tapestry that defied logic and reason. "And what if I refused to play your little game?" I challenged, my voice a mixture of desperation and defiance. The entity's smile held a promise of torment beyond imagination. "Refusal is not an option," it hissed, its voice a spectral whisper that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss itself. "Once you've crossed this threshold, there is no turning back." As the road stretched ahead, a landscape of unimaginable horror unfolded before my eyes. The entity's presence loomed over me, its intentions shrouded in darkness. I was a pawn in a game that defied the laws of reality, a victim of a fate that had been sealed the moment those chilling words were spoken. So there I was, hurtling through the abyss with a malevolent entity as my guide, terror coursing through my veins, and a sense of impending doom hanging over me like a shroud. The line between reality and nightmare had dissolved completely, and I was trapped in a nightmarish dance with forces beyond my comprehension.